The old wreck of the ship groaned in the night wind, its broken frame half buried in ash and stone. The human warrior slipped inside, carrying the fragile princess in his arms. The air inside smelled of rust and smoke, but it was shelter, for now it was the only place where they could hide. He laid her gently on a flat piece of metal that served as a bed. Her glowing skin flickered faintly like a candle struggling to stay alive. She was weak, hungry, and frightened, yet her eyes followed him as he moved. He searched the ship, looking for anything useful. The ruins gave him scraps, a broken blanket, a cracked flask, and a few pieces of dry rations. Not much, but it was enough to keep her alive a little longer. The princess coughed softly, pulling the blanket closer to herself. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "They will come." The warrior paused, turning to her. He did not know her language well, but the fear in her eyes told him what she meant. The enemy was still searching. They would never stop until they found her. He crouched beside her, his voice steady, calm. "Then we stay quiet. Then we stay hidden. They will not have you." The girl's eyes glistened with tears, but she nodded. For the first time, a small spark of trust lit her face. The night deepened. Outside, the battlefield groaned with the sounds of patrols. Strange lights moved in the distance, beams sweeping over the ruins as alien soldiers searched every broken wall, every corner of the city. Their voices echoed like metal grinding against stone. Inside the wreck, the warrior tightened his grip on his sword. Every muscle in his body was ready to fight, but he knew battle was death. If they found him, he would not be able to protect the princess for long. Stealth was their only hope. Hours passed like years. Each sound outside felt like a blade pressing against his throat. Once, heavy footsteps came so close he could hear the alien's armor scrape against the wreck's metal skin. The warrior held his breath, pressing the princess close. She trembled against him, her small hands gripping his chest. If she cried out even for a moment, they would both be finished. The alien scout paused, its glowing eyes scanning the wreck. Time seemed frozen. The princess buried her face against the warrior's chest, and he whispered so softly only she could hear, "Shh, I am here. I will not let them take you." For one terrifying heartbeat, the scout lingered. Then slowly it turned away, its heavy steps fading into the distance. Only then did the warrior allow himself to breathe. He looked down at the child. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else there too, relief. She trusted him. That trust gave him strength. But he knew they could not stay here forever. The enemy was searching every ruin, every shadow. Sooner or later they would return. He waited until the patrols moved farther away. Then in the deep of night he made his move. He lifted the princess into his arms and stepped out into the ruins once more. The city was a graveyard of fire and ash. Towers lay broken, streets cracked open, and smoke curled into the starless sky. The warrior moved like a ghost, each step placed with care. His eyes scanned the darkness, his ears tuned to every sound. The princess pressed close against him, silent but awake. Her glowing skin made her easy to spot, so he covered her with the blanket, leaving only her eyes peeking out. She understood, holding still, not daring to make a sound. The warrior moved through alleys and broken walls, slipping from shadow to shadow. But danger followed them like a curse. Twice they had to stop as patrols passed by, their weapons glowing in the dark. Once the warrior was forced to hide behind a shattered column, his breath silent, his body still as stone. The princess's hand clutched his shirt, her eyes wide with terror. At last they reached the edge of the battlefield where the city's ruins gave way to the forest beyond. Trees swayed in the wind, their shadows deep and thick. It was dangerous ground, but it also meant cover. Before stepping forward, the warrior looked back at the burning city. He knew the enemy would not give up. They would hunt them across forests, rivers, and mountains. The queen's daughter was too important. She was not just a child. She was a symbol of power, a key to victory. But as he looked down at the girl, he pushed that thought aside. To him, she was not a prize. She was a child who needed saving. He stepped into the forest, the shadows swallowing them whole. The night grew colder, darker. Every branch cracked under his boots like a warning. Every gust of wind felt like a whisper of danger. Yet the warrior pressed on, his sword in one hand, the princess in the other. For now they had escaped the city. But the hunt had only begun. Somewhere far away in her palace, the queen still wept, thinking her daughter was gone forever. She could not see her child hidden in the arms of a human warrior, slipping deeper into the night. The forest waited with secrets of its own. And in those shadows, their true journey was only beginning. The palace was quiet now, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of loss. The great halls, once filled with music and laughter, now echoed only with the queen's footsteps. She moved slowly through the corridors, her long gown trailing behind her like a shadow. Servants bowed their heads as she passed, but none dared to speak. They all knew her heart was broken. The queen entered her daughter's chamber. The room was untouched, as if the little princess might return at any moment. A small bed stood neatly in the corner, covered with silken sheets. Toys carved from crystal rested on the shelves. A music box sat on the table, its song long faded into dust. The queen sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as she picked up a doll carved in her daughter's likeness. Her fingers brushed over its delicate face and tears slipped down her cheeks. She whispered softly, "My star, my light, where are you?" Every night since the attack she had come here. She lit candles, she prayed to the ancient gods, she spoke to the stars as if they might carry her words to her child. But the stars were silent. Her generals tried to console her. They brought her reports, plans of war, victories and losses, but nothing could ease her grief. To the queen, no triumph mattered. Armies meant nothing. Her empire meant nothing. Only her daughter mattered. One evening, as the queen stood on her balcony, watching the ruined city smolder in the distance, a messenger approached. He was young, his armor still scorched from the battlefield. His face was pale as he bowed before her. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice shaking, "we have found no trace of the princess. We fear—" He stopped, afraid to finish. "Speak," the queen commanded, her voice cold. The soldier swallowed hard. "We fear she's gone, dead." The queen's heart clenched. For a moment she could not breathe. She closed her eyes, fighting the wave of pain that rose within her. She wanted to scream, to tear the world apart with her grief, but instead she stood still, her face a mask of stone. "Leave me," she said. The soldier bowed quickly and fled. When he was gone, the queen collapsed to her knees, clutching the balcony rail. Her tears poured freely now, her sobs echoing into the night. "No," she whispered, "not gone. I will not believe it. I can still feel her. She is alive." Her words were desperate, yet they carried a strange power. Deep inside, she refused to accept the truth they tried to give her. She was a mother, and a mother's heart knew. Somewhere, somehow, her daughter still lived, yet grief changed her. Day by day, sorrow hardened into anger. She called her generals and ordered the armies to march. "If they have taken my child," she said, her eyes burning like fire, "then I will take everything from them. I will bring their cities to ash. I will make the stars themselves mourn." The council bowed, afraid to question her. The war grew larger, fiercer. Blood spilled across worlds, but alone, when no one watched, the queen returned to the small room. She would sit by the bed, holding the broken crown of her daughter, the one left behind during the chaos. She pressed it against her chest and closed her eyes. "Come back to me," she whispered each night. "Please come back." Far away beyond her sight, her daughter lay hidden in the arms of a human warrior, alive but hunted. The queen's grief blinded her from the truth, that her hope was not gone, only hidden. But fate is cruel and fate is kind. Her sorrow would soon turn into something else, something greater. Because one day, when she least expected it, the warrior she had never met would walk into her court, and beside him, her daughter. For now the queen lived in grief. But grief was only the beginning. The forest was alive with whispers. Wind hissed through the trees and the cries of unseen creatures echoed in the night. The human warrior moved carefully, his boots silent against the earth, his sword always ready. In his arms, the princess rested wrapped in a torn blanket, her faint glow hidden beneath the cloth. They had traveled far from the ruined city, but danger followed them like a shadow. Every time the warrior closed his eyes, he imagined patrols hunting them, weapons ready, eyes searching. He could not rest. Not yet. At last, he found a cave hidden between rocks. It was narrow, damp and cold, but it would serve as shelter. He laid the princess down on a bed of moss, covering her with the blanket. She shivered, her small body weak, her breathing uneven. The warrior knelt beside her. He pulled a piece of dry ration from his pack and broke it into small pieces. "Eat," he said softly, offering it to her. The princess blinked at the food, uncertain. Slowly, she reached out and took it. Her hands shook, but she nibbled at the bread, her glowing eyes fixed on him. When she finished, she whispered something in her language. He could not understand the words, but he understood the tone. Gratitude. He gave her water from his flask. She drank slowly, then smiled faintly. It was the first smile he had seen from her. Days passed, and the bond between them grew. The warrior hunted small animals in the forest, cooking the meat over a small fire while the princess watched. She was curious about everything: his weapons, his armor, the strange marks carved on his blade. She would point at things and ask him words in his tongue. He taught her, speaking slowly, repeating until she understood. Fire, he said, pointing to the flames. Fire, she repeated, her voice soft but proud. He nodded. Good. She giggled quietly, then pointed at herself. Princess, the warrior smiled. Yes, princess. Then she pointed at him, tilting her head. Warrior? He nodded again. Warrior. Each night when the forest grew dark, she would sit close to him, her small frame leaning against his side. He could feel her trembling, but she did not cry. Instead, she listened as he spoke, telling her simple stories from his world, stories of oceans and mountains she had never seen. She did not understand every word, but she understood his voice, calm and steady. It comforted her. One night, as the fire crackled low, she tugged at his arm and whispered in broken words, You... safe. The warrior looked at her, surprised. Then he realized what she meant. You make me safe. He placed a hand on her head gently. Always, he said. I will keep you safe. But the bond between them was tested soon. One morning, as they moved deeper into the forest, the sound of soldiers echoed through the trees. The warrior froze, pulling the princess close. He crouched behind a fallen log, his hand over her mouth gently. Through the branches he saw them, 3 alien scouts, their armor shining, their weapons glowing with deadly light. The princess trembled, her glowing skin threatening to betray them. The warrior pulled the blanket tighter around her, whispering, Quiet. Don't move. The soldiers passed slowly, scanning the trees, speaking in harsh voices. The warrior held his breath. The princess's small hands gripped his chest, her eyes wide with terror. One of the scouts paused, turning its head. For a long moment it seemed to sense them. The warrior's heart thundered. He was ready to fight, ready to die if it meant saving her. His fingers tightened on the hilt of his sword. But then, as if fate showed mercy, the scout turned away. The soldiers continued forward, their voices fading into the distance. Only then did the warrior exhale. The princess buried her face against him, whispering in her tongue. He did not know the words, but he knew the meaning. Relief, trust, and gratitude. After that, she never left his side. She walked beside him when she could, her hand holding his. She leaned on him when she was tired. At night, she curled close, safe in his presence, and the warrior, who once lived only for battle, now found a reason beyond war. Protecting her gave him purpose. Her laughter, her courage, her fragile trust lit a fire in his heart that war had long extinguished. He no longer saw her as just a princess. To him, she was a child who had lost everything, yet still managed to smile. She was hope in a world of ashes. The bond between them was no longer just survival. It was something deeper, something unspoken but unbreakable. But the forest could not hide them forever. The enemy would not stop searching. Their bond would soon be tested in blood and fire. And when the moment came, the warrior knew. He would give everything to protect her. The forest was quiet, too quiet. The human warrior felt it in his bones, the silence before the storm. For days, he and the princess had hidden in the shadows, moving at night, resting by day. They had survived hunger, exhaustion, and endless fear. But deep inside, he knew the enemy would not give up. They were closing in. That morning, as the mist curled between the trees, the warrior sharpened his blade against a stone. The princess, sat close by, wrapping herself in the blanket, her glowing skin dim in the half-light. She watched him with worried eyes. She was learning more of his language now, enough to speak broken words. "You fight?" she asked softly. The warrior looked at her, then at his sword. He nodded. "If they find us, yes." Her small hands gripped the blanket tighter. She whispered, "Don't leave me." He placed a hand gently on her head. "I won't." But even as he said it, the ground shook with distant footsteps. The air filled with harsh voices. The hunt had found them. The warrior's jaw tightened. He rose to his feet, sword in hand. "Stay behind me," he told her. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. The first of the enemy soldiers appeared between the trees, armored shadows moving with deadly grace. Their weapons glowed, humming with lethal power. More followed, spreading through the forest like a net, closing in from every side. The warrior's heart pounded, but his mind was clear. He could not run. Not anymore. If they caught them, the princess would be taken. He would be killed. This was the end he had always known was coming. He raised his sword, the steel shining in the pale light. The soldiers shouted, charging forward. The forest exploded with the clash of metal and fire. The warrior fought like a storm. His blade cut through the air, striking with precision and fury. He moved with the strength of desperation, each strike fueled not by duty, but by the single vow he had made, to protect the child behind him. The princess crouched against a tree, watching in terror as the battle raged. She wanted to cry out, but she stayed silent, just as he had taught her. Her hands trembled, her small body shaking, but her eyes never left him. The warrior cut down one soldier, then another, but more came. A blast from an alien weapon struck his shoulder, burning through his armor. He gritted his teeth, refusing to fall. Blood ran down his arm, but still he fought. Another soldier lunged at him, striking hard. The warrior stumbled, his knees buckling. Pain tore through him, but he forced himself up again. He would not fall, not while she was still alive. The enemy. Commander stepped forward now, taller than the rest, his armor black as night. His voice was cold as he raised his weapon. "Give us the child," he said. "Spare yourself needless pain." The warrior spat blood and raised his sword again. "Over my dead body," the commander smiled. "So be it." They clashed. The warrior fought with every ounce of strength left in him. But the commander was powerful, his strikes heavy as thunder. The warrior's body screamed with pain, his wounds slowing him. He knew he could not last much longer. The princess saw him falter, saw the sword slip in his bloody hand. Her heart pounded, fear and sorrow overwhelming her. She could not lose him. Not after all he had done, not after all he had promised. And then, something stirred within her. Her glowing skin flared brighter, light spilling from her eyes and veins like fire. She rose to her feet, her small voice cutting through the chaos. She spoke words in her language, words that trembled with power. The ground shook. The air vibrated. A wave of energy burst from her tiny form, striking the soldiers like a storm of light. They screamed as the force flung them back, their weapons shattering, their armor cracking. The commander staggered, his black armor glowing with cracks of burning light. He turned to the princess, his eyes wide with shock. Impossible. The warrior, though broken and bleeding, saw the chance. With one final roar, he drove his sword through the commander's chest. The alien fell, his weapon clattering uselessly to the ground. Silence followed. The forest, once filled with battle, was still again. The warrior dropped to his knees, gasping for breath. His body was broken, but his eyes turned to the princess. She stood glowing like a star, her small body trembling from the effort. She rushed to his side, her eyes full of tears. "Warrior safe?" she asked, her voice shaking. He gave a weak smile, touching her shoulder. "Yes, because of you." She clutched his hand, refusing to let go. The bond between them, born in fear and struggle, had now been sealed in battle. Together they had survived. But as the warrior looked at the fallen enemies, his heart grew heavy. The power she carried was more dangerous than he had imagined. Others would come, stronger, more relentless. The fight was not over. Still, he looked into her glowing eyes and whispered, "We will face it together." Far away in her palace, the queen wept still, not knowing her daughter had just unleashed her true strength, not knowing a human had nearly given his life to protect her. The final stand was not the end. It was only the beginning of something greater. The sun rose slowly over the alien capital, its pale light falling on towers still scarred from battle. Smoke curled faintly from distant ruins, and the city carried the heavy silence of grief. In the palace, the queen stood alone on her balcony, her eyes fixed on the horizon. For weeks she had waited, prayed, begged the stars for her daughter's return, but every morning brought only emptiness. Her generals brought her news of war, of victories and defeats, of soldiers lost and enemies slain. None of it mattered. She listened, but her heart was far away, lost with the child she believed gone forever. That morning was no different. She turned from the balcony, her crown heavy, her steps slow. She returned to her daughter's room as she always did. The bed remained untouched, the toys unmoved, the broken crown resting on the table. She picked it up and pressed it to her chest. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Where are you, my star?" But even as she wept, something stirred in the great hall below. The heavy doors groaned open and the sound of footsteps echoed through the palace. Soldiers murmured in surprise, their voices rising with disbelief. The queen wiped her tears and straightened. "What is it?" she demanded, her voice sharp. She left the chamber and descended the long staircase, her gown flowing behind her like a river of night. At the bottom of the stairs, the hall was filled with guards, servants, and nobles. They all stared toward the great doors where two figures had just entered. A human warrior, his armor dented, his body bruised, walked slowly forward. In his arms, wrapped in a blanket, was a small child glowing softly with light. Her head rested on his shoulder, her tiny hands clutching his shirt. The queen froze. Her heart skipped a beat. She could not believe her eyes. The warrior stepped into the hall, his every breath heavy with exhaustion. He stopped in the center, lowering his arms so the child could stand. The blanket slipped away and the hall filled with gasps. The princess blinked in the light, her eyes glowing faintly. For a moment she looked around in confusion. Then her gaze fell on the queen. Her lips trembled. "Mother!" The queen's knees weakened. She stumbled forward, tears spilling down her cheeks. "My daughter!" Her voice cracked with both grief and joy. She rushed across the hall and fell to her knees before the child, pulling her into her arms. The princess clung to her mother tightly, her small body trembling. The queen kissed her hair, her face, her glowing hands. "You are alive," she whispered again and again as if saying it would make it real. "You are alive." The hall was silent, every eye fixed on the scene. Nobles wiped their tears, guards bowed their heads, servants covered their mouths in awe. At last the queen looked up, her eyes finding the warrior who had brought her child back. He stood tall despite his wounds, his sword strapped across his back, his face weary but steady. "You," the queen said, her voice shaking. She rose to her feet, holding her daughter's hand. "You saved her." The warrior bowed his head. "I only did what was right," but the queen stepped forward. To everyone's shock, she knelt before him. The ruler of worlds, the most powerful woman in the empire, bent her knee to a human soldier. "You returned to me what I thought I had lost forever," she said, her voice full of raw emotion. "No treasure, no victory, no power could equal what you have done. You gave me back my child." The hall erupted in gasps. The warrior, startled, shook his head. "No, Majesty. I am only a man." But the queen held her daughter close and answered firmly, "No, you are more. You are hope. You are proof that even in war there can be mercy. Even in darkness there can be light." The princess stepped forward, her small hand reaching for the warrior. She looked up at him with trust in her glowing eyes. "Safe," she whispered, the word she had learned from him. The warrior smiled faintly, kneeling to meet her gaze. "Always." The queen's tears fell again, but this time they were tears of joy. She placed her hand on the warrior's shoulder. "From this day my people will remember. Humanity will not be forgotten. Your name will be honored for all time." The hall erupted in cheers, voices echoing against the tall walls. The warrior stood beside the queen and her daughter, the three of them bound by fate. But even in that moment of joy, the warrior's eyes grew heavy with thought. He had seen the power the princess carried, the light that had burst from her in the forest. That power would not stay hidden forever. Others would come. Stronger enemies would rise. The queen felt it too, though she did not speak of it. She only held her daughter tighter, knowing that their reunion was not the end of the story but the beginning of another. For now, though, grief had turned to hope, and hope, carried by a child and a human warrior, was stronger than any weapon. The palace, once silent with sorrow, now rang with life again, and so, the tale of a vanished princess became the tale of her return, a story that would be told across stars, whispered in the halls of kings, and remembered by all who believed in miracles.